Hey there, thanks for stopping by. Evan Husney is the co-creator and executive producer of Dark Side of the Ring and the co-creator of the new show Tales from the Territories on Vice TV. Evan talks to me about fans who got carried away, wrestlers who were difficult to work with, and whether or not Dark Side of the Ring is actually coming back. I love talking to him. Hopefully you'll enjoy the conversation too. Here is Evan Husney. Evan.
What's up, man?
What's up, man? How are you?
Good.
So, the Territories
Yes.
is coming to Vice.
Yep.
Probably out now by the time you're seeing this. And I was watching the show, and I wonder if there was like one story that you heard that made you realize, like, okay, yeah, we have a show here.
Man, that is a good first question. Man, yeah. Well, we had started developing this show and thinking about it like back in 2019. So after the first season of Dark Side was when we started to work on this.
Wow.
And I think the story that, if I had to pick one, there's probably several. But, you know, along the way in filming Dark Side and doing interviews with people on the road and stuff, you hear these little stories, you know, that might be, you know, 4 to 5 minutes in length, but they're not like a full hour of like television, or they might not fit in that format. But we just hear these wild, insane stories. I think the one that really stuck with me was this story about the Freebirds and Junkyard Dog, and hearing that along the way. Again, classic territory story, Mid-South, when it was the Junkyard Dog, who's the hero of the South. He's the ultimate babyface, and you have the Freebirds, awful, horrible heels, you know, and everything, with Confederate flags and everything waving around. And there was this one angle where they blinded Junkyard Dog, the Freebirds did, and he had to come to the ring the next week to retire, and he had bandages all over his eyes, and the people were crying in the audience, children were crying, you know, it was horrible. Freebirds came out and they stomped him and they beat him up, and the heat was just like insane.
Because people believed that they were really beating up a blind, about to retire Junkyard Dog.
Exactly.
This is real life. This isn't...
Right.
It wasn't that good, the sort of meta world of like, oh, we know we're involved too.
Right, exactly. This is the era when people believed, and you know, the wrestlers stopped at nothing to protect the business. So the stakes for everything are extremely high. And then allegedly, the way we heard it is a fan jumped into the ring, not a plant, somebody totally under the spell of wrestling and seeing their hero in jeopardy, and pulled a gun out on the Freebirds and said, "I got your back, dog," you know, and just realizing like that, man, that just would never happen.
By the way, if that happened today, that guy would have a pro wrestling tees store with a shirt that says, "I got your back, dog."
Yeah, or who knows? Yeah, for sure. And but yeah, it's just like that kind of just the Wild West era of the territories, the lawless sort of crazy environment where fans believed and kayfabe reigned supreme. And I think out of that story, it was just like, where's a home for that, you know?
Yeah, and so are you thinking, like, is there, like, some version of Dark Side of the Ring where we go, this episode of Dark Side of the Ring is just a bunch of wild territory stories?
We definitely thought about that along the way of, like, you know, man, just hearing these little stories that were so great, but trying to fit them in. Even some of the early episodes of Dark Side, we jam in little stories into the larger picture, but... really how it came together, like officially how the show came together was after season 1 had started to air, I'm like at this fucking grocery store and I'm looking at my phone and it says The Rock has mentioned you on Twitter. And I was like, this is one of these insane moments I'll never forget.
It's a life changer for anybody.
Yeah, it was crazy. And it was like, what? And obviously growing up, you know, I'm an Attitude Era, you know, a generation guy. And so growing up, that just never ever thinking that would happen. Like The Rock is putting you over on Twitter, you know, when Dark Side had just come out and he gave us a shout out, gave us a kudos, which was amazing.
Do you remember which episode it was that made him go like, yo, check these guys out?
I think it was like the combination of the Bruiser Brody episode being up on YouTube and then the Randy Savage episode.
Oh, man. So this was the very beginning of Dark Side.
Very beginning. Kicked the whole thing off. And it was perfect because... when the Macho Man episode hit, the Macho Man Miss Elizabeth episode we did hit, which was the first one that made it to air, Hulk Hogan had put out a tweet that was like kind of burying us, being like, it's 5 out of 10, brother. You know, it's what he What do you? 5 out of 10 too is a very specific.
Look, it's not all bad, but
Yeah.
it's still a failure. 5 out of 10.
Mediocre, brother. And so that it was like this 1-2 punch of like Hogan burying us, and then like I think a couple hours later, The Rock putting us over.
You have to wonder too if The Rock was aware that Hogan had buried you, and he was like, "Okay, that's gonna add to my motivation to make sure that people know I'm on the other side. I'm on the non-Hogan side."
Yeah, it was like being right there at WrestleMania 18 or whatever the fuck it was. But Sky Dome, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, it was just that was incredible 1-2 punch, and just something I never would have thought. Like that he would have seen our show, The Rock would have seen it, but then also taken the time to like shout it out, which is so cool. So then that sort of turned into this conversation of like, people surrounding me like, you should reach out, and you never know what might happen, So we reached out to and set up a meeting, and $7, Brian Gewirtz, former WWE head writer.
You mean author Brian Gewirtz?
Yeah, that's right. Author. He's a great author. He's an awesome book out right now. And it was kind of perfect. Like, I went and met with Brian and his colleagues, and we just sort of talked like, maybe what if, is there a show we could do together or some sort of other wrestling related project? Because we were just starting, I think, getting into developing what season 2 of Dark Side of the Ring would be. So we already had that, but is there something different we can do? And then we both sort of had this mutual appreciation for the territory era and wanting to do something around the territories. And then that was like, okay, well, I'll go back and think about what that could be. And then, again, just coincidence. We were actually developing the Chris Benoit episode of Dark Side of the Ring, and I met Chavo Guerrero Jr., who helped us immensely in that episode. He helped us like get Chris Jericho on board and get both families involved. And he was just working on Glow, so Chavo had transitioned over into Hollywood and production, and he was kind of telling me a concept that he had about territories and wanting to produce a project about the stories from that era. And so we all kind of came together, me, $7, Chavo, and we just kind of brainstormed what this show wound up being. And we went out and pitched it way back in 2019, 2020. And then Vice came to the table and wanted to do another show with us again. So we said, hell yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, we got something we could do, and The Rock's into it.
Yeah,
So that might be,
yeah.
Does that appeal to you?
At
all, Vice?
Yeah.
Now, was it difficult at all? Because the whole crux of this is that it's from an era where kayfabe was as protected as it's ever been, and
Right.
in order to tell the stories right, you need the people who are protecting it to tell the stories.
Yeah.
And there are certainly people that are like, oh, no, I'm taking this to my grave. And I think there are people on this show that you would assume some of these stories are stories that they intended to take to their grave. Was it difficult to get people to go, no, not only do we want to do the show, but we want to specifically tell the stories on television that you would never tell on television?
We've definitely run into that, like, with this show and with Dark Side, some folks who are kayfabe to the grave, as they say, but I didn't have too many problems with that. It was more that you're talking about an era, when people lived hard, and it was a wild time. And unfortunately, a lot of wrestlers have passed, from this era. I mean, there's so many people you think about that would have been incredible for a series like this. Like, two that come to mind, like Bobby Heenan and Roddy Piper. Like, just to have them on this show would have been unbelievable. So it was more of a challenge, like, because the format of the show, for those who don't know, is that instead of one-on-one interviews like we do on Dark Side, it's getting like 4 to 5 different wrestlers together around a table to sort of campfire tell their best stories from one particular territory. And then, of course, we do all the reenactments and that all shit and like that. And but it was more finding who is still around that can tell these stories firsthand, who can get along with each other, because there's a lot of people who don't want to sit,
You're putting together cafeteria tables.
Yes, exactly. And there's some folks, I ain't talking to him, or whatever, or whatever. So you deal with that and trying to make everybody happy, and you want to get definitive voices. Then there's some deep cut voices that are in the show.
Yeah. No, I was gonna ask that too. Is that like and maybe you've built up a trust with Vice and the fact that $7 is involved in everything, but I felt like there was a mix on these episodes of people that it's like, okay, that's a name, right? That's name value, but like there are other people on that I know, and I'm glad that they're there, but that's because I'm a hardcore wrestling fan, like a TV executive. I can imagine having to sit in an office and explain why, like, I mean, no offense to anybody, but why, like, Greg Gagne,
Sure.
like, I am very well familiar. You're very familiar.
Yeah.
But, like, a TV executive that doesn't watch wrestling, you might have to convince them, like, no. It's far more valuable that voice is on the show than another name that you may have heard before.
Oh, of course. And I think, because obviously with the proven success of Dark Side, I think Vice, trusts us in that way. And obviously, $7 and Dwayne, same thing. And but for us, it was important to, like, for me at least, in producing the show, to make it entertaining. I was like, it has to be the wrestlers that have the best stories. Whoever has the best story to bring to the table, it's going to win, because the show, whereas with Dark Side, you're sort of telling one story over the course of an hour. You use a lot of different voices to tell that one story. This is sort of like, the show kind of lives and dies on the chemistry of who's at the table. So you really have to pick just people who got great stories, that get along, have great camaraderie, or if there's tension, or if there's like people who, if there is some friction, which I know you've seen in one of the episodes, that's also fun too. But for me, it's like just picking folks that cause like how we did it is our team would read all the wrestler bios, like all the biographies, autobiographies out there, watch all the shoot interviews, just find the best stories that have been told, all the legends, the lores of the road, and try to find who can tell them, what are the funniest ones, what are the best ones, what are the weirdest, wildest ones, and then call these wrestlers who've told them or were a part of the story at one point and pre-interview them and just make sure, okay, yeah, this is still funny, he's got it, let's do it, we can tell the story, and then we would kind of book the table based on that.
Were there any stories that were told while you're filming that you're like, oh, we didn't know that was a thing, like we didn't know that story, or we weren't planning on telling that story, but that's amazing?
Absolutely. I would say it's almost like 50-50.
Wow.
Or like 60-40 maybe, where it's like we plan for 60 and then 40% is just like, how it goes with, and it's happened to me a lot too, where like wrestlers, like being a participant in a social situation with a bunch of wrestlers, when you get them together, they just organically start telling stories, and I remember it was at StarCast, I think the very first StarCast, or maybe the second one, I was there and I walked into a bar and it was Eric Bischoff, Road Warrior Animal, Scott Norton, Sonny Ono, few others, maybe Medusa, I can't remember, but a couple other folks there. And they were just doing exactly that. And it was just telling stories one after the other about this crazy time that, I had diarrhea on a plane, and killed everybody on the plane, whatever. Yeah. Or like something, and they're like, holy shit. And then I would go into some other crazy ass story and just go to some other place. And so in my mind, I was thinking like, man, this could be a show somehow, but it's so hard to produce that because it's so organic and wonderful.
Yeah, how do you recreate that?
How do you recreate like that, So that was always like in the back of my mind. But anyway, yeah, so going back to what you're saying, is it does, like, you can plan for so much of it, and you have to, because we're doing reenactments and we're trying to bring the stories to life, so we have to make sure we have all the little pieces of it. But then it just, if one person says, all right, that reminds me of a time when Ricky Morton fucking cocaine and the goddamn, then of course we're gonna,
we're not gonna stray from that.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, I was I've seen a handful of the episodes so far, and I have to tell you that as much wrestling as I've watched, and like I do love too that these shoot interviews that we would get as kids on VHS tapes, and we get a copy of a copy and bootleg it and stuff, that these have become historical documents and the catalyst for this, kind of amazing television, and that these stories are being passed on in great ways. Even with all those shoot interviews and everything, I had no idea what an animal Mad Dog Vachon was.
Oh, yeah.
Until I watched the AWA episode.
Yeah. And again, back to your first question, what were the stories that might have inspired this, or one you first heard? Definitely that one. Oh, my God. And for those who don't know, it's like, Mad Dog Vachon, in the AWA episode, we tell a story from Greg Gagne, pretty much, who was a part of this. Mad Dog Vachon pretty much had an entire pharmacy inside of him, over the course of one day, and they somehow had to get this Mad Dog Vachon, after drinking beers, taking pills, smoking pot, taking Quaaludes. They shoved him on a low altitude plane that Vern Gagne, the promoter of AWA, had to get the wrestlers around from town to town, because their territory was quite large. So they had to get this guy on a plane, and then somewhere along the line, when they're 4,000 to 6,000 feet in the air, he flips out, wigs out, and just opens the airplane door and starts chucking everybody's gym bags out of the door. And so it's just like, out of the moving plane door.
In the air.
In the air, yeah. And so like that was just one of those things where it's like, holy shit, that would be a blast to recreate and to film.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, 100%. Like that's just like, Mad Dog Vachon lived up to his name 100%.
Was there anybody specifically that it was hard to convince to do the show or to kind of sell on the concept of the idea that, no, this is going to be a show and it's going to be done well? It's not, because that's the other thing with like creating wrestling content. It really has gotten to the point where it runs the spectrum. There's stuff that is just like, it's cheap and it's garbage and you're like, oh, I shouldn't be involved in this. And then there's stuff that's really, really well done and will probably live forever.
Yeah, totally. I mean, many cases, especially just even with being the dark side guys, when you're the dark side guys, it's like it's like, I think a lot of wrestlers assume that even if this is a different show, that it's going to be a tragic exploration or,
right.
It's going to, and we're like, no, the show is a different in tone. It's much more fun and it's, freewheeling and, it's much more about, it is about celebrating this time period and the lifestyle and this wacky, wild time, when wrestling was a 24/7 performance, and so in those cases, it's tough to convince folks to take that ride with you. But also one thing that, Dwayne and Seven Bucks brought to the table for the show was access to people that we wouldn't have normally been able to get through Dark Side. A couple people who are still actively under contract with WWE, for example. So you saw in the Memphis episode, Jerry Lawler's there.
And it would have been, and I was thinking about that when I saw that not only is there a Memphis episode, but then there's also a separate episode that is the Kaufman episode.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you can't get Jerry Lawler, you really can't do either of those two episodes. You might with Jerry Jarrett and maybe you could squeak out a Memphis episode. It'd be lacking.
It would, yeah.
But you absolutely couldn't do the Kaufman, and you probably shouldn't do the Memphis either.
No, I know. And that was, and I, honestly, the first episode everyone's going to see on October 4th is about Memphis, the more general, about Memphis-centric stories. And then while we were filming that episode, they just were going on a roll about Kaufman. Like, we had little details of things, little stories within the Kaufman story we wanted them to touch on, but they just kind of gave us the whole story. And so then it was like when we after we shot that, we were like, oh shit, could this be its own hour? And then it organically became that. So we didn't even intend for that. So it's kind of a happy accident there.
That's what I was wondering, because as you're watching the Memphis episode, I know it occurred to me, like it got to the end and I'm like, it's a great episode. Like, but I go, did they deliberately avoid Kaufman stuff? Like, because is it too cool for the room? Like, all right, you all know that story. We're telling these stories.
Yeah.
And then when I find out there's a specifically Kaufman episode, I was like, thank God.
Yeah.
Thank God.
Exactly. It was all supposed to be part of the same thing, but there was just so much of it and it was all so great. So we're like, it's a second episode, whatever. But yeah, Jerry Lawler, you 100% need to have for that, or it never would have worked. Another person I was very excited to get in front of one of our cameras is Michael Hayes, because we've never been able to have him on Dark Side, and we've always wanted him, just even for the fashion. And
so you do have him for the World Class?
No, he's actually in the Mid-South episode.
Ah.
Yeah. So he's in the Mid-South episode, which is a banger lineup, by the way. It's probably one of our biggest. It's Jim Ross, Michael Hayes, Jake the Snake, and Ted DiBiase.
Oh my God, that is cool. A banger lineup.
Yeah, so it's cool.
And also, I mean, it's kind of great. People talk about doors being forbidden and whatnot, but I feel like there's just wrestling has created so many different avenues and has widened so much that you've got a fixture of WWE, Michael Hayes, and a fixture of AEW, Jim Ross, sitting at the same table telling these stories, and it's like wrestling is. They say, well, WWE can control wrestling, but wrestling is bigger than any one presiding body can possibly contain at this point, I feel like.
No, it's so true, and it's cool to see that, that even though, I mean, these guys, their careers extend well beyond where their present roles are in these corporations, but It's also a fun episode too, and people are going to be surprised with all the cigarette smoking that occurs in that episode as well too. But that gives it an air of authenticity, I think.
I think so too.
That people will be like, "Oh shit!"
That's wild too, because you think about it, you can't really smoke cigarettes on TV anymore, right? You don't see it.
I hope you can. Yeah, we'll find out.
Yeah. I felt like the Andy Kaufman, it's really cool that you guys did the whole episode on Andy Kaufman.
Yeah.
And as somebody who's like watched everything about that and every retelling in the movie and the documentary about the movie, and I'm from Hollywood and the everything about it. I think back on it, and that might have been one of the first things that introduced me to territories. I wonder. I'm just thinking about that now.
Probably.
Because I would have been into Andy Kaufman in like 8th grade or something like that, and finding these tapes of him in Memphis would have been like, well, why do they call it Memphis? It was only on in Memphis, and then you start to expand outwards. That might have been my introduction to the territories, but I was really happy that I felt like I was getting even more out of a story that could have felt like I had heard 100 times before.
Yeah, no, and to me it was like again, something we didn't plan for necessarily to be a full episode. And so and I've heard it so many times, but being like present in the room and like hearing all the little mini stories under this one umbrella, and it's sort of feeling like here's the Ocean's 11 kind of inside, plot of how this all was, put together. And I love that. I love when, especially in a kayfabe era, when you're talking about just the meticulousness of putting like a year-long angle together and like how that works, and when it, and then it pops off and it's like it pops off perfectly. I just love that. So, and I feel like the Andy Kaufman, Jerry Lawler angle, or just Kaufman Memphis, is one of the best executed like territory era angle. I mean, there's a lot of really great ones, and it takes in a huge amount of time, but it's just so emblematic of like, because kayfabe was so important to it. What's really fascinating in that episode too is like, obviously the moment a lot of people remember is when Jerry Lawler pile drives Andy Kaufman, and of course then Andy Kaufman, a guy who took the business so seriously and was going to protect it at all costs, and that was kind of part of his.
I mean, you could argue that he kind of destroyed his Hollywood career because he took wrestling so seriously.
Yeah, everyone couldn't figure it out.
Yeah,
people couldn't figure it out. But he just got it so much. He got the concept of like, kayfabe to the grave, and so he goes to the hospital. He works the hospital staff. He's making them perform all these tests on him. He's putting up appearances that he's really injured when in fact he's not. And the part of it to me that just kind of blew my mind, being a wrestling fan, is that when you see in the episode that Bill Watts, the Mid-South promoter, probably the most staunch practitioner of kayfabe there is, calls up the Memphis offices and saying, "I'm glad you hurt that punk Andy Kaufman," And it's like, whoa, that's how good they did, is they were able to fool the unfoolable in that, So
yeah, there's this scene in the episode where Jerry Jarrett is like, he doesn't want to say it even that day, but he's like, I mean, I didn't want to say it, but you're kind of a mark, Bill.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's so funny. For anyone that knows Bill Watts, that's so funny. To me, that's just such a illustrative example of like the magic of a just perfectly executed territory era angle. Because what it really requires is that blurring of the lines and the audience being under that spell, Well,
yeah, and it took the angle became national.
Yeah.
It's very rare. Even the hottest territory angle. Like,
right.
How are you going to make this into a national story?
Yeah.
Well, if Andy Kaufman carries kayfabe with him
everywhere
onto the set of Taxi,
yeah,
and gets Tony Danza upset, and onto Letterman and everything, there was a part, and I think it's so kind of special that we're getting to hear that story now, because one of the great things about the series is all the footage that you guys have.
Yeah. And
you can see that even when Kaufman died,
yes,
he was dead.
Yeah.
And when Lawler's on TV, he goes, it was sad, but I don't really have much good to say about Andy Kaufman. And you're like, as a wrestling fan, I'm going, God bless you, Jerry
Yeah,
Lawler.
I know.
Like, I am so happy that after Kaufman died, he's dead. Only the heels are really shedding a tear for him.
Yeah.
Like, it's magic.
It's really crazy, yeah. And to still perpetuate the storyline after Andy's passing, and in that promo, to be like, I don't know why. I hope when I die, they don't interview Jimmy Hart. Someone who hates me.
You're going right. A guy died, but you're going back to box office. It's like that's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah,
that's
true.
what Andy would have done.
True. Wrestlers today, take note on that. Anyway, so that is just amazing to see. Yeah, and for me, it's like one of the key ingredients, of all of this is obviously, fans keeping up appearances for the fans, and the lengths that these wrestlers back then would go in order to keep up appearances is staggering. And the most extreme example of that is in our Jim Crockett Promotions episode that we did, where I think a lot of wrestling fans have heard legend or tale of the plane crash of '75. Ric Flair was on this, Johnny Valentine, Tim Woods, and David Crockett were on this flight that I believe a wrestling fan was the pilot of. Got these guys, I'll fly you over to the matches, and he mistakenly measured what the fuel was to the weight in the plane, and then they ran out of fuel and the plane crashed, and it was horrible, big tragedy. But the part of it that gets overshadowed when in any retelling of this story is that Tim Woods, who was a babyface, Mr. Wrestling 2, he was a babyface, and the other guys on the plane are heels, right? So that's a no-no back in the territories. Like if you're a babyface riding with a heel, you're going to get fired and exiled, and probably a bunch of wrestlers are going to kick your ass. If word gets out, right? And
you're gonna lose your job and also beaten up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because you're going to threaten everyone's livelihood. Because for years, for decades, it was the belief that if the business was exposed, or in cases where it had been exposed, ticket sales went down. So everybody. It was kind of this omerta code, like we all got to keep this on the up and up if we want, to make a living, right? So anyway, long story short, Tim Woods is in the plane crash. In the moment that they are pulling him out of the wreckage, the EMTs or whatnot are coming down there, he has the wherewithal, even post-crash, to be like, I should not be on this plane. If people find out, it's going to be bad. So he gives the EMT guys a false name, basically, to say that, I'm so-and-so and not... this wrestler. I think he said he was a promoter, not a wrestler. So then what happened is they check everybody into the hospital. I mean, people have Flair broke his back. Johnny Valentine never wrestled again. The pilot died, and Tim Woods has got broken ribs. And he comes to in the hospital and he's like, oh shit, I shouldn't be here. People are going to figure this out. Checks himself out of the hospital against doctor's orders.
With broken ribs?
With broken ribs. Like literally right as like that the next day or two. Not only that, just to throw people off, because there was rumors starting to go around that he was on the plane. Just to dispel all those rumors, he books himself on a match and wrestles an entire match a day later when he has all the broken ribs and everything. Just say I wasn't on that plane because I'm wrestling. Yeah.
Wow.
So that's crazy. And then last little bit is Jim Crockett Jr., the promoter. He said after the fact, years later, that was one of the great sacrifices of the territory, which kept Mid-Atlantic, which is the name of the promotion, basically in competition for so long, because he took the great sacrifice to protect our business. And then you could make an argument that set off a chain reaction of what WCW would become, and you'd be a big player, and then
because Mid-Atlantic, Jim Crockett ends up being WCW,
so
ends up being Nitro, because Mr. Wrestling 2 would not break
kayfabe.
Wow, wow,
so that's cool,
and it's really cool, especially because it's not like he's doing it for his check, right? It's not like he's taking the booking because he wants the check for the match. He knows that we all need this business to be healthy.
Because we're going to kick his fucking ass if he doesn't.
I got broken ribs. I don't want to get beaten up on top of that.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's so... I mean, it's so cool. I mean, you and it's like, you romanticize that. You couldn't do that now.
No.
Like, information is way too out there.
No, but, I think, the way to work it today... and I'm not a wrestler, I don't know anything, but to me, it's like when it works, and what I've learned just from hearing all the stories of the territory era, it's playing in that gray area. It's playing in if you can, it's the art form of playing in the gray area of, is this real now? Well, I know this is a bunch of horse shit, but that guy could be real, or this element could be real. And so playing in that gray area is really what's amazing. And I kind of wish it's like, not to bring up a modern issue,
of course,
but the, CM Punk scrum, or all that stuff. I mean, that is, as I know, is dramatic, and, it's a complicated matter behind the scenes right now. But looking at that, it's like, even as jaded as I am, about wrestling, and, when you see that, you're like, well, is this, is that real, or is that not? And you don't know.
You're paying to watch CM Punk and Ace Steel versus the Young Bucks.
Exactly. Of course. And that is like, and you see that, throughout the history of the territories, is like when you have a situation like that, and these guys are, enough part of this, this family of wrestling, and this lineage to know that, well, we got to turn this into box office.
Right. There's money to be made.
Yeah, I'm not just saying that, but I'm saying from the objective, me looking at it as a fan and not being able to discern in that moment. Obviously, we knew the story came out, days and weeks later, but just not knowing in that moment was exciting.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
And there's also, every now and then you do still see a character.
Yeah.
That is like they carry it with them.
Absolutely.
Onto their Twitter accounts, and they can't, like, you don't really see them out of character.
Right.
And even if you're knowing, okay, I know when he's on television.
Yeah.
That he's gotten permission to do it. I know that there's a person behind this. I know that this is a character.
Yeah.
But the fact that I haven't seen the other side at all allows a suspension of disbelief that goes like, no, I'm on board because this is all I know of this body.
Of course. And you look at someone like MJF too.
Sure. It's a great example.
You have to bring him up. And obviously he's, and I'm not even going to expose his business, at all either. But it's like, he's so talented, and even, when he's cutting promos about things he's upset with or grievances he has, there's an element of reality to what he's doing. And again, I think that's a perfect way of blending, a work and a shoot.
Well, let's bring it back to your business partner. Let's bring it back to DJ. And the fact that, like, The Rock versus John Cena as sort of icon versus icon was enough.
Right.
But what really gave it that extra juice was the fact that they traced it back to The Rock being annoyed that John Cena made comments in a shoot media interview about him. And I feel like in the build-up to that match, the thing that people really remember is when Cena called out The Rock for having his promo written on his arm, and you saw The Rock go from, oh no, now Dwayne's pissed now.
Yeah.
Dwayne is pissed, and you're like, and this is, now I'm invested. Even more so, right? Of
course.
Every time.
Anytime there's real stakes, or there's a rivalry. I mean, that's why it works so well in MMA too, is like when you see those scrums and you see like the real beefs. I mean, that's what sells, and that's what gets people who aren't fans from the outside to like pay attention.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The Memphis episode, I learned more about a person who, the way the story was told, I liken them to a wrestling Rasputin.
Yes, I knew you were going to say
Mario Galento.
Yeah,
Mario Galento, the man who will not die.
Yes,
I mean, I don't know when that story is being told. I don't know how much of it, and that's kind of the beauty of it, right? That you don't know how much of it is like heightened in the minds of these former wrestlers, and did this guy really lose an eye, and did he need 200 stitches? But you know what? I don't care, because I believe the story. I believe this man was stronger than death, and I found myself Googling and YouTubing and trying to find out more about Mario Galento.
I sure hope Mario Galento trends on Twitter next week. Just to set this up too, I think it's important to say that, the format of this show is not like, deep, hard journalism. It's not getting to the hard facts of, what happened, maybe like in some ways that dark side would be. But this show is about the tall tales. This is about the stories that evolve over time, the telephone games of, anytime you read a rock, biography and you hear a story of the exploits of like a Jim Morrison or somebody else or an Ozzy Osbourne, and you're like, oh shit, those stories have grown in infamy over time exponentially, And so I think this story probably in some ways there's some, exaggeration to it, but we lean into it, we're like, okay, if he's going to tell it like this, then we're going to reenact it that way. And I think that's part of the fun of the show. So anyway, Mario Galento was this incredible heel face. He just had this heel. He looks like Captain Hook, kind of.
Yeah, absolutely.
He looks like a pirate. And he's just got an incredible face. And he basically was part of. He was a fixture of the old pre-Jarrett iteration of the territory when it was through. Oh God, now I'm. Do you remember?
I know exactly. You're blanking on the name is contagious.
It is.
It was a very old sounding name though. It was like a single syllable,
right? No. Oh shit. Well, we'll think of it.
Yeah.
God.
I feel like it's ended with a TCH or a TSH or something like that.
It's in the episode. Watch it next week, October 4th. I can't keep all this shit straight.
Yeah, this is in the October 4th episode, right?
This is. Yeah. So basically, the old regime, in short, was the guy, the promoter before Jerry Jarrett, his predecessor, was starting to get like Alzheimer's or something, and people were getting in his ear that, hey, Jerry Jarrett's trying to push you out of the territory. And Jerry Jarrett would become the promoter eventually, but he was going to push him out. And so Mario Galento was sort of like, even though he was this heel wrestler, he was this promoter's like, enforcer, right? And so he took it upon himself, like, I'm going to jump Jerry Jarrett on TV in front of an audience and fuck him up, And what he did is he went into the ring, he hit Jerry Jarrett over the head, and Jerry had no idea what was happening. He turned around and he saw Mario Galento standing there in the ring, and obviously he wasn't supposed to be there. And then, of course, like you hear a lot on this show and in Dark Side and all these other stories of old in wrestling, Jerry Jarrett goes for the eyeball and takes Mario Galento's eye, based on some crazy training that he was brought up, and you hear that
if you have kids, definitely have them watch this one, because Jerry Jarrett does kind of explain how one is able to pop an eyeball out of the socket. Now, it's a very good defense mechanism.
It's crazy, and it's something like in the years that I've been doing this show and the Dark Side, it always comes back to the eyeball. So many guys have ripped another guy's eyeball out.
That's the way primates are too. Primates go for the eyeballs and genitals. Right. So I feel like there's something to that.
No, totally. And it's crazy. So here we go, another eyeball story. So he takes Mario's eye out, but the fight doesn't end there. Mario with one eye goes back to the dressing room, grabs a billy club, and then thinks he's going to be able to charge Jerry again, but then Jerry takes it and beats his ass with it. And then flash forward to, I'm not sure, sometime after another match, Jerry Lawler is in the ring wrestling somebody, and then Galento shows up with a straight razor in the middle of the ring to try and slice up Lawler during another match off script, and then again, his ass is beat in that instance as well too. Galento's. Yeah. And then there was actually a third return that we couldn't get to.
So he really is a Rasputin.
He is totally the curse of Galento. Yeah. He again, there was another instance where him and his wife were like seated at ringside, and they had a gun this time. And they
just keep escalating. It went from billy club to straight razor to pistol.
Yes, exactly. And then I can't remember exactly the details, so I'm paraphrasing, but it was something like Jerry Jarrett knew some scary ass dude who had I think been in prison for slicing someone's neck at some point or whatever. So Jerry Jarrett had the neck slicer guy go up to Galento, and he's like, if you ever come here again, I'm gonna slice your neck, or whatever. So I don't know exactly what happened, but it was another this guy's here again, and we gotta teach him another goddamn lesson.
I mean, that's the beauty of it, right? That like you were saying in the beginning of our conversation, that a fan came in to the ring with a gun,
right,
to help Junkyard Dog, and I'm sure when they went into the locker room, they're like, oh, that's great, that means this is working. I can't imagine the stressful work environment of, well, we're doing great, we sold out the Mid-South Coliseum, but I mean, this Mario Galento keeps showing up
Yeah.
with weapons. I really hope he's not there, because as I'm trying to tell a story in the ring in the back of my head, what if Mario Galento is here with a flamethrower this time?
Exactly, an RPG. Yeah, no, basically that's what it is, and that's what's so fascinating again about this era. I keep going back to it, but it is like the idea, especially working heel. There's a lot of stories in the show about about just the heels of particular territories, because that's where you do find a lot of the interesting stories. Is wrestlers who willingly are throwing themselves in harm's way. Because, again, you have these fans under the spell of wrestling, and they're going to believe, they're going to slash your tires, they're going to break your windshields, they're going to fuck you up outside, and that's going to, you're going to be challenged in bars, you're going to be, people are going to call you out, and but to willingly be like, okay, I'm a heel, this is my job, and that's going to enter my life all the time. So there's tons of stories like that, and it was broken down to me in a pretty, this is, I think, the most succinct way to understand it, which is, Jim Cornette, who's in the Jim Crockett episode, was sort of breaking it down and sort of saying, like, the evangelical love that certain fans would have for their heroes, and talking about, the Rock and Roll Express and how many fans in the Carolinas at that time were just absolutely religious for them. Like, to the point of, there was one time where Ricky Morton, I think, was given like a, every year they'd get all these Christmas cards from all the fans, because they were such incredible baby faces and everyone loved them. And they got one Christmas card where it was like a family standing around a fire, and on the mantle was a portrait of Jesus Christ and then the Rock and Roll Express, And if you understand that, like,
God, I love it.
I know.
I love it.
I know.
Don't you wish that you were raised that way? Like, my parents had a picture of the Rock and Roll Express and Jesus on the wall.
I know, it's incredible. That's an amazing slice of Americana. But just, if that's how much they believe, and that's how much they're heroes. Of course, when a heel comes in with a foreign object, with a fork, is going to slice him in the head and he's going to bleed everywhere, of course they're going to run into the ring and bring guns and try to protect their icons, and so it's ripe for great storytelling.
Yeah, I don't want to spoil the story too much, but I think people as I was watching Lawler tell Memphis stories, and I think people don't give Lawler enough credit for how tough of a guy he is. Like, you had to be tough, and
definitely,
I think when you're really good with words, people forget that you can be tough as well. And Jerry Lawler kind of laughingly telling the story of, I would have ran over a man and killed him, but my tires were flat. Everybody's like, ha, yeah, we've been there. And I'm like, that's the territories.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's like putting his car in gear. I'm going to kill that son of a... Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I think too, what this series really drove home for me, and I don't know that I considered it as much as I should have, is that obviously the thing about the territories was that they were running shows all the time.
Yeah.
Which I think is well documented. The people in the territory era were just working matches nonstop. But I think that what's not given enough credit is that by very nature, a territory runs a very limited geographic area.
Yeah.
Meaning that you've got a cycle. If you're in the Memphis territory, there's Memphis, and what's surrounding Memphis is the only place that you run, because number one, that's where your audience is, but number two, there are other promoters running the territory outside of yours, and you don't go on their space.
Right.
But what that means is that your product has to be so good. Like, we hear now, oh, you can't run New York twice inside of 6 months, 9 months, whatever it is. But in the territory days, like, your product has to be so good that you can fill, for instance, in Memphis, a 10,000 seat arena every single week.
Yeah, totally.
That's crazy.
It is crazy. And, like with Memphis in general, it's like, they got the, Evansville, Indiana show, and then they got the Louisville, Kentucky show, then the Memphis show. But it also gives you, the way it's, a lot of territories are smart in that the fact that, they had their, weekly television program that's obviously in service of, in promotion of their larger shows. But because this wasn't like cable television like we know now, it's like you could run the same show you could repurpose that on every stop of the way because it's not being televised. There's no social media, obviously. So like you can see what works in one town and then kind of adjust it a little bit, go to the next town and then see
almost
that,
like stand-up comedy where you do your joke and you keep working on it and working on it and working on it until it's ready to be broadcast on a special.
Right. No, totally. And I'm not saying that they did every territory operated that way, but some of them did, and I think that that's also just cool. It just speaks to that time when everything's in its own little bubble. And then, of course, because you're in a bubble, and everybody kind of knows this about the territories, but you could bring new people in, and then people would go away, and then they wouldn't come back for another year, and then they could be a totally different character on the other side of the country. They could be a babyface over here, but they're a heel in our territory, and nobody would know the difference unless they were like a hardcore fan who's getting all the magazines and reading between the lines and stuff like that. But there's just sort of a magic about that, So
yeah,
it's a special time.
Yeah. Yeah, let me ask you about a rumor that was persisting on the internet for a period of time. Did the WWE get Dark Side of the Ring canceled?
That's so crazy. No, not at all. It's funny because, and this has happened a few times over the years. It's very funny to to have grown up a wrestling fan, to have read the wrestling, the wrestling newsletter Observer, to have been a part of that, like as a fan, and to be like so interested in, the conspiracy theories around everything. And then to now be like a part of the conspiracy theories, to be mentioned and to be theorized. And this is, so it's so crazy to see how, a rumor like that can just take on a life of its own. But then, of course, me being me, I kind of like to keep it in the gray area, a little bit.
Right.
Well.
So you don't mind people believing.
Nah, it's fun to see. It's fun to see people speculate,
And honestly, you're probably shooting the territory show as these rumors are coming out. So you're like, let's kayfabe this, brother. Maybe we can turn it into box office.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Maybe when Darkseid comes back, we can go, hey,
exactly.
the season they didn't want you to see.
Yeah. How will they miss you if you don't go away?
Right.
But no, basically it's always the real answer to always.
Because here's what the rumor was.
Please go ahead.
That I guess Vice and either A&E or NBC or something like that, like there's a similar parent company with one of the TV vehicles that WWE has, and they said, well, since Darkseid's not coming back, WWE went to their people and they said, hey, we're doing docs now. Those guys shouldn't do docs anymore. And then Vice said, you got it, guys. And they killed Dark Side of the Ring. That's what I read.
Their most successful show.
They were like, no problem. We'll stick to Dark Side of the 90s.
Yeah, right.
But we won't talk about wrestling.
Right. No, I mean, it's like, look, it's their most successful show. Like, they absolutely want to make it, and stay tuned. I'm gonna keep it a little kayfabe, but stay tuned.
Okay.
But it is interesting, in terms of like how something like that takes on a life of its own, in terms of people theorizing one way or the other. But really, the answer to any conspiracy theory is really just the most boring answer, whatever the most boring reality is. And this is, in case, pretty boring, which is the idea that, we developed territories, this show, in 2019. It took all the way till around now-ish to get it going. And after season 3 wrapped up, it was kind of like, okay, now's the time to do it. Vice bought into it. Let's go. And it was like, we needed I've been working 24/7 on getting this show off the ground. So it's to think about doing another season at the same time. It would just be subdividing my life to such a degree that I think the quality would suffer on both sides.
Yeah.
So really, it was just like an opportunity to, for us just to do something different, just to do this show we wanted to do for a few years now, and this was the time. And then it was like, and we'll come back, afterwards,
Yeah.
And so, but then it's like, yeah. That's the boring truth. It's just that, like, we want to do this other show for a second, and then we'll come back to that.
Right, like you told The Rock you would make this show.
Yeah, we got this.
You don't want to disappoint The Rock.
No,
if you got that excited over The Rock tweeting you.
Yeah,
I can only imagine what it's like when he wants to make a TV show with you.
Yeah,
and also making documentaries. I could only imagine is difficult. You've made
with wrestlers, yeah.
Yeah, you've made 30
dark sides, yeah.
You made 30 you just made 30 documentaries one after the other.
Yeah. No break.
I could see where you guys were like, what if we stayed in the same universe?
Yeah. Yeah.
And got to tell some of these and also it's probably I would imagine that there are things that you cover on Dark Side that have been like, this is really heavy for me to be so like in, because when you're telling those stories the way Dark Side tells them, you got to be so in it. Was it nice doing this show and getting to be back in a place where it's like, oh yeah, wrestling is just fun and we can have fun telling these stories?
Man, that's right on the money, because after season 3, like, you know, it's no secret there was some controversy out of season 3, you know,
sure.
And being you know, around in the center of that, it took seeing how, you know, no pun intended, but the dark side of our industry.
Are you saying season 4 is going to be Dark Side of Dark Side?
Yes, I think it could be, but just sort of, you know, having been a part and experience of that, it took a toll, for better or worse, on my fandom. You know,
sure, of
like
course.
It hurt my fandom of the industry, and so much so that like I took the wrestling figures down.
Really?
Yeah.
Like it really was like, I can't see this for a while.
It was kind of like, yeah, like I just had to take the Hasbros
Wow.
down, you know, and tuck them away for a little bit. And it's true that like, just as you said, like what you said, I'd resonate with is like doing this show and being able to focus on like getting back to what I loved about, you know, wrestling, and what I love about this era, and what I love about, you know, the great stories of this era and the territories and everything. Like it kickstarted my enthusiasm, you know, again for wrestling. And now, you know, I'm buying Bam Bam shirts. You know, I haven't bought a Bam Bam shirt in a minute. You know?
Right.
So it's that's been nice.
Yeah, I mean, you got a Leatherface hat on.
Yeah.
That ain't a Texas Chainsaw Massacre hat.
No, it's not.
It's a bootleg Leatherface, but the hat's not bootleg. The character is bootleg.
There you go.
Yeah,
Leatherface. Oh my God, dude. Like any of the bootleg horror wrestlers are my shit. So.
I mean, that's another. I remember discovering that as a kid when it was like,
yeah,
IWA King of the Death Match.
Yeah.
95 was obviously for a lot of American kids, that was the introduction. Kawasaki Dream.
God.
I got that VHS tape.
Unbelievable.
And then I found like another VHS tape at like an indie show or a flea market that said like Cactus Jack Terry Funk Deathmatch compilation. I'm like, yeah, I need that. And that's where you see like, I think Leatherface was at the Kawasaki Dream show.
It sounds about right.
Freddie wasn't.
Yeah, right.
Jason Voorhees wasn't.
Yeah.
But they were on the other deathmatch shows,
Yes.
and it's like, this is amazing. You could just do this. But what was interesting, and it kind of goes back to the territories, is if you watch those old like IWA Japan shows, when Leatherface goes out there with his chainsaw into the audience, or when fake bootleg deathmatch Freddy Krueger is walking through the audience is cowering in fear.
Yeah.
They run away from the wrestlers, and it's almost like the
awesome.
last vestiges
of that.
What the territories were.
Totally. Yeah. But 100%. And talking about those horror, you know, wrestlers, like the like bootleg flea market horror guy, you know, characters that were in wrestling, the versions of the iconic characters. Yeah. It's so amazing. It's just like, that's where you could see Freddy versus Jason, you know, in the 90s, you know, was there.
Except with barbed wire baseball bats.
I know. It's the best thing ever.
In a swimming pool.
Yeah. It's literally the best. So
Yeah. Do you have a favorite territory, especially after all of this, after all the exploration and all the stories that you've heard? And I'm sure you guys have both, you and Jason, have gone over a ton of footage, because that's what these shows are made of. Is, I mean, I think that Dark Side became very well known, not just for the fact that you're telling these stories, but for the reenactments.
Yeah.
People love the reenactments, and that is what comes over to this show.
Yeah.
That the reenactments are still, and they're so...
Couldn't give it up.
Yeah, it's so clearly like, I feel like that's the connective tissue that bonds these two universes.
Yeah. It's a pain in the ass, but
they look cool.
Thank you. Yeah.
I think, so you've got the reenactments, but you've also got a lot of great footage.
Yeah.
In these, and I'm sure that you guys combed through to get the best of the best.
It's tough, you know. It's harder when you're focusing on territories to get a lot of this footage. I mean, there are full on territories. Like we did an episode on Portland, you know, which is great. I'm really excited we did that, because it's a deep.
Are there Matt Bourne stories?
Absolutely.
Oh, thank God.
100%.
There he is, right behind you with the paint on. Those are the Hasbro reference shots, by the way.
That's incredible.
He's in the studio. Those are the original from the guy who like sketched or whatever, like they came from somebody's basement. Those are the original hard copy photographs.
That's amazing.
Not a reproduction.
That's killer.
That were the Hasbro reference shots.
That's killer. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Definitely Matt Bourne stories to the nines on that. But yeah, Portland, deep cut territory. Not a lot of people, it's not off the tip of their tongue when they think of territories and wrestling. But it's a place where wrestling got weird, man. Wrestling got weird up there. There's some freaky matches going on. And
what kind of matches?
Well, one of the things that we talk about in the episode is, one of the final nails in the coffin of the territory was when the state athletic commissions, which it's a weird thing in wrestling. When wrestling used to be governed by actual athletic commissions, they would put rules. I mean, some of them still are. I mean, right?
Isn't
New York is.
I think New York is. Yeah, that's
yeah,
why
New York is.
GCW couldn't do barbed wire at the Hammerstein
or blood
Yeah.
How about that?
Which is wild.
Which is insane. But yeah, so in Portland, they had their state athletic commissioner was a guy from New York who came in, and he was like, yeah, no blood, no this, no top rope shit. Like, it was crazy. So
no top rope. Wow.
I'm pretty sure, I'm maybe paraphrasing, but like a lot of insane restrictions. So then they're like, I don't know what the hell we're going to do. What are we going to do to make this interesting? And so Len Denton, the grappler, who's on the panel, awesome deep cut, guy for the show. He was the booker, and he came up with this amazing idea. Well, we're just going to hit each other with milk and cereal. And so they would have these full-on brawls where they're just hitting people with cartons of milk, and the milk's just going everywhere. And then people are really getting into it, like it's a Gallagher performance.
Yeah,
and cereal.
I'm sure the visual was incredible. Did you see splatter? And now, did you get to see it? Is there tape of this?
Oh, absolutely. They like tie a guy down, like he's like tied to the ring post in the middle of the ring, like it's like the Hitcher or something. And then they just belt this guy with these like cartons of milk, and that shit probably hurts.
Yeah, see, that's the problem. That like milk, getting hit with a carton of milk probably actually does hurt.
It does, I think.
But probably doesn't look like it hurts.
Yeah, I know.
So you can't really sell that hard for milk, even though it hurts way worse than like a chair across the back might, right?
Right. And so they called that whole gimmick. They called it the Breakfast Club. That's who they were. So that's kind of a fun little deep detail with that. I can't remember where I was going with the whole Portland thing, but it's an excuse.
Well, we were talking about watching
the footage.
Thank
you. I'm so glad you reminded me of that, because it's insane. So. And I'm sure this isn't the only territory that's this way. But the reason that a lot of the footage is hard to frickin' see is because these promoters would just record over the master tapes. So they're not like cataloging the matches. They're just thinking dollars and cents. Like, fuck it, we'll just record over the same 3-inch master, or whatever to save
money on the tape.
Right.
Not realizing the library.
There's no library now.
But who knew? Like, they were taping over episodes of Johnny Carson back then.
Right. True. That's true. But so there's no library for Portland, except, thank God, Playboy Buddy Rose taped every single match on VHS.
The blow-away diet.
Exactly. So Buddy Rose, who's the main fixture heel of the territory, he thankfully recorded most of the programs. And so now if you're out there and you're a collector, you're very familiar with the Buddy Rose tapes. That's the only way you can see a lot of any of this footage.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you'd have to, and he was just like literally recording it at home on a VCR as it aired.
Just eating donuts and watching it and recording it.
So you went through the Buddy Rose tapes?
We did, absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah, I got the Buddy Rose tapes.
Wow, Were you able to find the masters, like Buddy Rose's masters? Because that's,
No, they've been passed around, like Cornette's got a copy of it. I think you can, if you dig on the internet, you can find like a torrent of it or something.
Yeah.
Do
you have, back to the original question, like as a fan, I mean, I don't know, unless you've spent so much time with the territories, you're pushing the Hasbros off the wall again. But do you have any like a favorite territory to watch?
Oh yeah, I think that I think if I had to pick one, just because the aesthetic, the music, the venue, everything, I think I just have to say world class.
I love world class.
It's just so. I think the venue is what makes it for me. The Dallas Sportatorium, and it's all about, and how hard hitting it was
when they were kind of one of the early territories to like do what ended up being WWE style camera work, right? Where they would get the camera like right in the ring.
Putting mics in the ring and doing great vignettes and music videos and like they were really
even their TV opening
awesome.
Was great. That song.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I just love it too. And then like, the guys are walking out to like Stranglehold and like ZZ Top and and then they'd have like, heels like the Kabuki and they had like all this just amazing stuff. Obviously the Freebirds and the Von Erichs is incredible angle. You got Brody showing up, Abdullah, Iceman.
Iceman King Parsons.
Who we tried to find.
You can't find him?
We literally asked everybody we knew in our entire Wrestle Rolodex to try and find Iceman for the show. And we ran out of time, just couldn't find him. And I wanted him so bad. Shout out to Iceman. There's an amazing on YouTube. If you search Iceman Parsons, he did like an incredible TV commercial for like, I want to say lamps or mattresses,
Isn't that amazing that he's an icon of on a very short list, the most important territories in wrestling history. And he's just gone from the public eye entirely.
Yeah. Another one of those for the show was, who we did find, but it was like the day before, like, can you get on a plane? No, was who literally went missing or people actually thought was like MIA from wiped off the face of the earth was Billy Jack Haynes.
Wow.
And Billy Jack obviously had a career in WWF and everything, but he was a huge fixture of Portland.
And I feel like for a minute he had like a pretty shoot interview conspiracy guy career too.
Well, he's had some. Yeah, he's a total like Wrestle QAnon for sure.
Yeah,
but he also he's got a crazy life story too, and he also if you look at it, Google it, there's a crazy story about him where he basically has admitted that he was an accessory to a murder.
Jesus,
which is insane. And he's trying to expose it as a huge thing that there was a government thing tied with like the authorities in some place in the South and. It's a crazy story if you look into it, and who knows what's true and probably, or what not. But it's just like he's always been, to me at least, kind of a fascinating character.
Yeah,
and it would have been interesting to stick him on a panel and see what happened. But yeah, it just didn't come. It just was too late.
I'm sure that when you guys did the Bruiser Brody doc, you did not think, okay, we'll do this and then spend our entire. This is what we'll do. No. We'll make wrestling content. We'll make this is going to be our careers. Are you happy about it? Are you glad to be the
figures are coming back up?
Okay,
yeah, I got a few. I put Bam Bam back up, and I put the Road Warriors Hasbro's are up.
All right,
the Brody Japan figures back up. But no, of course, when we did the Bruiser Brody thing, that was literally, we thought that was an hour for television. That was going to be a one-off doc. It was just a great story that we just fell in love with, and we thought that was all we were working towards, was just that. And when we had the opportunity to do the first season, and then of course all the others and the people we've met along the way and the friendships we've made and the team that we've built, got to give a shout out to the team, because a lot of the team that works on Dark Side came over into territories and couldn't have done it without them. These guys everyone works so unbelievably hard and is so unbelievably stressed out right now because the show isn't done. And
it's not done.
It's not done.
It's not done just yet.
It's not done just yet. Okay. So that's another reason why the Wrestle conspiracy people need to chill out, because the show needs to be finished.
Right.
Before we can get back to doing another job here. But yeah, and but I feel incredibly just grateful, to have had the experience to really do this, because I grew up such a huge fan, and if I could get in a time machine and put the 10-year-old me in a fucking sharpshooter and say, you're gonna fucking do this, it would be like it would have totally blown my mind in a million pieces.
I tell you, as I was watching this show specifically, I felt it on certain episodes of Dark Side. But watching the first 3 episodes, I was lucky enough to get advanced copies of the first.
Brother.
I had a deep appreciation for the historical implications of this show existing. The fact that these wrestling stories, I feel like, and I feel the same way a lot of the times with some of the A&E stuff. I get excited just that it exists, just that, for instance, Rey Mysterio's story is going to be told
Yeah.
for a mainstream audience, and these are the things that last forever. Like really well-made documentaries. I feel like the audience is far wider than it is for just making wrestling content, and I feel like they live forever. And I was watching this show. It made me very appreciative that these wrestling stories have a place now where they can live forever. Like you've done it. You've documented an era in history where, like you just said, footage was literally being taped over.
Yeah, no, totally 100%. And even just for me personally too, I'm just so excited that, and just grateful we had the opportunity, even like I think back to like the Road Warriors episode in season 2. And,
Yes.
And then, Joe passing so soon after that. Or more importantly, like doing like the New Jack episode too. Like, and I know.
I mean, you'd change Nick Gage's life. He's still alive, but
yeah, I guess. I mean, and obviously like, it's also the collaboration. Like, I don't want to take, full credit too. It's like they gave us the opportunity, to tell their story. And I'm super grateful for that, that they believed in us and they trusted in us and allowed us to do that. And that's just like so awesome. And so exactly. So having that opportunity, but for this show especially, and there was kind of two paths with this show with territories. It was like, is it going to be an exhaustive history of every territory, which would take, 10 hours per territory? Is that what we're going to do? And then we sort of decided that, no, we just wanted to have a vehicle that it could be like, a platform for just these, to be a fly in the wall for just these wild and crazy, road stories, bar stories.
That's exactly what it is. And that was my takeaway. I felt like the Memphis episode, I felt like it was a love letter to Memphis. It kind of gave them their flowers for being as influential as they were and as successful as they were and everything. And it was just like great fun stories. The Kaufman episode, I just love that this is being documented. I love that we've got Lawler's perspective on it. I love that we've got Jerry Jarrett's perspective on it. It's great. And then the AWA episode, I was like, holy shit, the stuff that was going on back then.
Yeah.
That was a mind-blowing one for me.
Yeah, it's pretty fun.
I know that you're still working on episodes, but is there anyone, maybe Portland, I don't know, is there anyone in specific that you think like this is going to be the one that blows people's minds? For whatever reason.
Oh yeah. And two, I should also say, not doing the exhaustive history of a particular territory, it also is going to allow us the opportunity to return to do another Memphis episode.
100%.
Season 2 with a different lineup, or just change the lineups.
Just different stories. Whatever. Yeah, there's a million stories to be told.
Totally, 100%. But back to the question. I think out of the ones that you haven't seen, I'm excited about the Florida episode, Championship Wrestling from Florida.
That's weird that all the psychotic, mind-blowing stuff would come out of Florida. You never hear that.
No, exactly. And that's also another all-star lineup. And again, another person, I think, because of the collaboration with Dwayne that we were able to get on board for this show for the first time is Gerald Briscoe.
Oh, and great.
Yes.
That's great.
And I have to report that he's an incredible man. He is so funny and is such a nice guy and incredibly pro, and I want to hang out with him every day. He's like my kind of guy, 100%. So that was incredible. So anyway, Gerald Briscoe, Kevin Sullivan.
Oh, I was thinking just now, I should ask about Kevin Sullivan, but if he's not on the episode, I don't want to blow up your spot because Kevin Sullivan is a necessity for this one.
100%. Kevin Sullivan. We had Brian Blair. We had Steve Kern.
Love it.
Skinner from the WWF.
Of course. And Doink 2.
And that's right. That's right, of course. And we also had Bob Roop, deep cut territory wrestler. But again, another amazing deconstruction of a territory angle between Bob Roop and Steve Kern. It's one of the craziest, again, taking real life and bringing it into the ring, where it's Steve Kern, his dad was a POW in 2 different wars, which is insane, Korea and Vietnam.
Wow.
Yeah, and in Vietnam, he was captured, I think, and he was a prisoner for like 7 or 8 years or something insane, and they, of course, thought he was dead. And then they got the letter that he's actually coming home. And so the whole family was, turned upside down. And so there's an amazing story we tell where Steve got to meet his, when he first got reconnected with his dad. But then, of course, he was just breaking into wrestling. And then it was like, how do we turn into box office? And Bob Roop is the heel who plays kind of the sort of, Trumpy, like, if you're a POW, you're a coward kind of thing, which is insane. But then, of course, that angers the hell out of any local military person, as it should. And then you have military people showing up to the matches in full fatigues, cheering on Steve Kern. And you also have, like, death threats. Like, Bob Roop's getting like, yeah, we're going to blow up his house with an anti-tank grenade, and we're going to put a gun to his head. And they do. They actually did. Somebody did put a gun to his head in the parking lot over this angle. So it's pretty crazy. So there's that. And Steve Kern, man, another, just a guy who had never had a chance to work with, but was amazing. And I don't know if Jason told this when we did an interview once, but I got to put this out online. But Steve Kern, Skinner, Jason Eisner, who's my tag partner and all this stuff, he had his first real formative live wrestling experience was with Skinner. I don't know if he told you the story when he was on last, but he has this amazing moment when he was like 8 or 10 years old, WWF house show way out in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And him and his friend got front row seats right by the ring entrance, when the guys are coming out. So here comes Skinner, who's playing the sort of Crocodile Dundee heel, chewing tobacco kind of guy. And Jason just shouts from the front. He goes, "Skinner, you suck!" And then Skinner just leans over and just grabs Jason by the collar like this. I was just like, "I'm gonna skin you," and it was this memory that he held on to. And so Jason wasn't there for when we shot the round table for Florida. And of course I was like, all right, Steve, there's something you need to do for me. So with all of the gear, all the lights, everything, like the 5 camera people that we have, we shot like this incredible 30 plus year later promo where he's talking about, Jason, when you came to Halifax, or when I came to Halifax, your shithole town, and retold the whole story from his perspective. And it's incredible. I got to release it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's amazing. So Steve Kern's amazing.
That's so great. Yeah. Yeah. I can't wait. I can't wait to watch all the episodes of this. And here's what I do. It's going to be on Vice every Tuesday night at 10 p.m. Eastern.
That's right.
So you can watch the show there. I like to watch it on Vice, 10 p.m. live when it's on. Boom, watching it. Great. There's a community aspect. Everybody's tweeting about it. I like that. I feel like the wrestling community, like, it kind of shifts the dialogue for the week.
Right.
I felt like that was going on with the last season of Dark Side. It's like, this week we're talking about this week we're all talking about this.
Yep.
So I love that. I feel like hopefully that'll happen again.
Sure.
Like this week we're all talking about Memphis and finding YouTube clips and stuff like that.
I hope.
But here's the deal. Here's the rub, and I don't even know if this affects you in any way.
Oh my God.
I buy the season on Apple.
Oh.
Right?
Okay.
So then I go and, like, because we haven't figured out how to get these things on Blu-ray yet, I got all the Dark Sides, and I'll have all the territories on my little Apple TV, on my iPad, on my whatever, and so I've got it all on home video for posterity.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate that. And we are working on trying to get this thing out on a physical media.
Oh.
We are. It's tough because, Vice has never done anything like that, really.
Of course,
so,
but, like, this is special.
It is, and it's kind of like, it feels like there's kind of a steep hill of education to be like, we should do this, because wrestling fans buy like Blu-rays are their favorite thing,
Yeah.
So
absolutely. You can get it signed by people who are on the docks. You can. I'm sure.
Think of that.
Think about the commentaries you could record.
Oh, I know. Oh my God, it would be insane. Yeah. Oh, for sure. All the footage that's on the cutting room floor.
Of course, you still have all that footage on hard drive somewhere, right?
Definitely, 100%. Like. Yeah, here's just the 3-hour New Jack interview. Like, go. Like,
oh my God, that would be the way to go. Oh, you could just here it is, the whole thing, and we'd sit there watching it.
Yeah,
we used to watch VHS tapes.
I know,
taped on a camcorder of a wrestler talking for 4 hours.
That's so amazing.
I remember when I first heard about shoot interviews, and I'd be like, no, I can't. Like, who would sit there and watch it? Like, this was before YouTube. This was before anything. And then I don't even remember who my first one was. But I sat there and I just watched it.
Probably Honky Tonk for me.
I remember the one.
That was an early one.
The one shoot interview that I watched like multiple. I watched it over and over.
Yeah.
Was the RF Video Steve Carino shoot interview?
Oh yeah.
Because he lied the whole time.
Wow, I
he
do
did
remember
it
that.
like he made everything up.
Wow.
And I thought it was so funny.
That is funny.
It was like my favorite thing. But I watched the Steve Carino shoot over and over again. But yeah, there's so many good ones. And I'll tell you what's great about this show is that on some of the shoot interviews, like you're just believing a wrestler's word for it, right?
Oh yeah. Can't do that.
So like I don't know. You watch the episodes and you'll realize in a couple weeks which one I'm talking about. But there's one where one of the superstars is telling a story, and he's like, "Well, I'm not the one who did it, but
yeah."
And then at the end of the story, everybody at the table is like, "Yeah, I mean, no disrespect or anything, but you're definitely the one that did it. Like, I'm gonna go ahead and call you out on that.
Yeah.
You're lying. You did it."
Yeah,
And it's nice to have those other voices in the room because as you're watching at home, you're thinking, I'm pretty sure that guy did it.
Yeah, and that's kind of, again, we go back to what we've been talking about this whole time, the gray area, and we talk about the idea of, we're not going to tell you, like what we think or what the truth is. It's somewhere in between, I'm sure, and the audiences can decide. But that's what's fun about a story like that one, the one you're referring to on the AWA episode.
On the AWA episode,
yeah. It's pretty fun stuff.
Great. It's great. The whole thing's great. Tales from the Territories. It's the next thing that the guys from Dark Side are giving us. And if you don't believe, The Rock's voice is on the opening.
That's incredible.
Big time.
Yeah.
Big time. You went from The Rock tweeting you to The Rock voicing your intro.
It's crazy. I can't believe
fantastic.
it. When that came in, I was like, whoa, this is some serious.
That's it. This is
serious
This is
now.
for real.
Yeah. So that's, and I feel incredibly grateful for that he's supported us, also through this and wanting to see this project through and being so involved with it and like sharing so much on social media. And, even when we were doing season 3 and we were doing the show on Grizzly Smith and Jake the Snake's family, a difficult, hard episode, but that he took the time out of his day. I think he was shooting Black Adam. I think he was literally in the trailer shooting the movie and was just like, I got to tell people about this. And just to imagine that he saw it, resonated with it, and was like, I gotta, put these guys over, like while I'm in the busiest time in my life. And so I was just like, man, that just blows me away. So I'm incredibly grateful for him.
He's like the one guy that like, let's do Dark Side of the Rock. It's impossible. There's nothing. It's just here's a documentary about this awesome dude.
Yeah, totally.
Who's good at a bunch of stuff.
Yes, of course. Yeah. And so it's just awesome. I feel just really great. We all do. We feel super grateful that he's like believing in us and taking this opportunity, putting his name, literally his voice on it. And so that's just a huge stamp of approval for us.
It's great. I think wrestling fans are really going to dig it. I dug it. I could have just watched one episode and gotten through this interview easily, but I watched all 3. So
well, I was going to send them.
It's good. It's good stuff. Everybody check out the show. Thank you for hanging out, Evan. It's always good seeing you, man.
Of course, man. Thank you for having me.